Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Katie Ingersoll. I'm the Programs Director at SMU DataArts. So our agenda with this recording today is to provide an update about our project to streamline the cultural data profile. Before we start, I do just want to acknowledge that we're in the midst of some really challenging circumstances. We are really glad to be able to provide this update to you remotely so that many of you can watch it from your homes, but we hope you are all safe and well, and just thank you all for taking the time to think about this with us today. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Zani Voss, the Director of SMU DataArts. And Zani is going to give us a little bit of background about why we are pursuing this project to streamline the CDP survey. Go ahead and get started, Zani.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you all for your interest in the CDP survey Streamline. As Katie said, we stand in solidarity with all arts organizations, employees, artists, especially those of you on the front lines, as things continue to unfold, as well as the grant makers that support them. One of the fundamental reasons behind our merger to become SMU DataArts was actually a desire to better serve the field by marrying data collection with knowledge generation and useful tools out of that data. As many of you have heard from us over the last year and a half, this drive is manifest in three short-term goals: to improve the user experience of our online platform, to improve the quality of the data we collect, and to increase the benefits that SMU DataArts provides to arts and cultural leaders and to all of our stakeholders. It's a commitment to improving our value proposition by reducing the cost of participation, your time and your energy, while increasing the knowledge benefits you receive about your organization and the field more generally for having entered that data. The changes to the CDP that we're going to talk about today are foundational to all of these goals. First, the cultural data profile accounts for the majority of arts and cultural organization leaders' experience with our platform. We know we need to cut down on the time you spend entering data and the complexity of the process. Second, if our survey and instructions are clear and concise, then the data we collect will be better. Our goal with this redesign is to address existing points of confusion in the survey, which will lead to better data for the entire sector. Finally, we're committed to providing relevant and meaningful benefits that help you get value out of the data. And all of this depends on having a cultural data profile that works for all of our partners, which is why we're investing the time this year to get it right. So again, thank you all for being here today. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Katie to talk to you about those changes in more detail.
Great, thank you so much, Zani. So before we jump into talking about our Streamline project, I want to mention that this Streamline is one of multiple changes that we have made or are planning to make to improve the user experience during data entry. One of the first projects we completed after our merger was adding prior year data into the financial sections of the survey so that you can see numbers you entered last year and a little bit of an indication about the magnitude of changes from year to year in each line to guide your data entry. We also implemented changes last year to the process of running a funder report, designed to ensure that you don't miss the final step necessary to complete your grant requirements as you're using our platform. So those are two items that have already been implemented, but we also have some additional improvements planned that will depend upon Streamline for their success. The first is a redesign of our account and survey setup process to make it smoother and quicker. This will be released alongside of Survey Streamline. And lastly, this redesign of our survey will be a first step towards a future goal to allow data upload from spreadsheets, which we think will be a time saver for many of our users. So to move on to our main topic, we have three main goals with this Streamline. The first is to reduce the number of questions in the survey. Second, we hope to noticeably decrease the time spent by organizations filling out the CDP. Lastly, we want to preserve the usefulness of the data for all of our stakeholders. To speak more about this last point, when we embarked upon this Streamline, we started off by examining the key data points and insights that were used most frequently in our reports to funders, our KIPI dashboard, and our research. This formed the basis of the new survey that we'll share with you today that we're proposing. We want to preserve the data that are essential to those areas while also making meaningful reductions in the amount of data that you are being asked to provide. Part of this project is a commitment to feedback and conversation with you, our users and partners, as we plan these changes. We have already held a series of focus groups and one-on-one calls to review an early draft of the Streamline survey, which has informed what you will see today. But our feedback is not complete. Today, we will also begin an open comment period. The draft survey you will see today will also be available online where anyone can provide feedback on the questions and some key definitions. We hope you participate in this open comment and also encourage your colleagues who work with the CDP to do so. Everyone who has already taken time to participate in a call, focus group, or take a look at this recording, thank you so much for giving your attention and insights to this project already. The thoughtful feedback we are getting helps to ensure that the new survey will work for everyone. So here's our current timeline for this project. Our open comment period opened on March 17th and will be available until April 7th. Just to note, the survey that we will walk through today is still a draft. The open comment and today's webinar are an opportunity to weigh in on the questions as they are not finalized yet. In June, we'll share the final survey. We will be sharing the full text of the survey as well as documentation about how the new survey compares to our current version. We just want to make this available as soon as possible to allow everyone time to plan. The new survey will be live for all users in late 2020, which means that everyone who fills out the CDP once the survey switches over will be using the new Streamline survey. We'll be seeking a date for that switchover with minimum impact on any grant deadlines around that time, and we'll communicate a month in advance about the exact timing and any expected downtime. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about the new survey. First, I want to talk a bit about the scope of the changes overall. The purpose here, again, was to reduce the complexity of the data entry process and save time. So a big part of that was streamlining. In most financial sections of the survey, we have streamlined line items to reduce the level of detail required. In the program activity section, we have also reduced the number of different sections where data can be entered in favor of a simpler approach with a few standard sections available to everyone. We'll look a little more closely at that change later on. There are some areas where we have removed whole sections of the data profile. I'll mention those throughout. There are also a few instances where we have added a line or a section because we think it will make data entry simpler or because it is a data point that will help our research team better understand the sector. And finally, there are a few sections of the survey that have not changed drastically. I'll be using the visual cues you see here to point out these types of changes throughout the webinar. So let's start with organization and survey setup. Overall in this section, you will notice fewer screens to complete before you begin work on our survey. We've also added an additional section about mission and constituencies served. Let's take a look at this. So here's the first screen of the setup process. These questions are very similar to the current questions asked when you set up your organization. Every organization is only asked to provide these one time, but you will have an opportunity to make changes if necessary each year when you return to the platform. Here you can see the new section I mentioned related to mission and constituencies served. We have added a new question asking if your organization's work is rooted in a specifically defined ethnic or cultural voice. This is combined with a set of questions you'll see on the right. These questions are in the current data profile, and they ask organizations if they primarily serve any particular audiences or if they target a general audience. Together, these data points will help us better understand how organizations approach questions of cultural voice, representation, and community. So we know that there are many different approaches to this in terms of organizational mission. A few examples may include a large museum that presents art from a wide range of cultures and attempts to serve the entirety of its community, or a dance company which creates programming within a specific cultural tradition and shares it with a broad audience, or finally a neighborhood-based organization embedded deeply within and serving a specific community. These types of questions will help us to better understand the differences and unique strengths of all of these types of organizations I just mentioned. Here you'll see this page, which includes questions you'll answer each year in order to start your survey. This particular section has been reduced from multiple screens to just one. The first section of the new survey is the financial total section. This section has not changed significantly from the current survey. This section is only shown to audited organizations, and it is used to collect high-level totals from your audit or review, which in turn are used to verify totals in later sections. The idea here is to ensure that your data is as accurate as possible. Next, let's look at revenue. In the earned revenue section, you will see a reduction in the number of lines from 29 lines in the current profile to 13 lines in the draft of the new survey. Let's take a look at this. So the earned revenue section, which you see here, the proposed new version, will be divided between program earned revenue, which is primarily earned through mission-related activities, and non-program earned revenue. You can see the reduced numbers of lines reflected here. One new line that is worth mentioning, because it is new, is the attendee-related revenue line. This line combines all non-program revenue that tends to come from individuals engaging with your programming. You can see examples of the type of revenue included here directly in the line item name, including gift shop merchandise, concessions, sponsorship revenue, advertising, and other non-program attendee-related revenue. We will also continue to have sections for you to report your investment revenue and your non-operating revenue. Here and throughout the survey, if any line items or sections do not apply to your organization, you can leave them blank. Next, let's take a look at the contributed revenue section in the new survey. The contributed revenue section is actually largely the same as our current survey. This is because the details currently collected about contributed revenue are used frequently in reports to funders, as well as our analytic tools and research intended to help organizations better understand sector-wide fundraising trends. One change that has been made in this section is the addition of a line for special events revenue. In the current survey, organizations are asked to report their special events revenue by source, and then use a breakout section to provide more detail on their special events. We know that the current approach does not match with how many organizations present this information in their financial statements. So we've added a line to directly report special events revenue within this section. Let's take a look. So here you can see the proposed contributed revenue section. You will see the addition of a special events revenue line down near the bottom. You may also notice that we are still collecting data about the number of contributors in each category, but this data is now collected on the same screen as the financial amounts for easier entry. You will also notice that we have retained a question about whether your organization is in the middle of a capital campaign. There is a draft definition provided there on the screen next to the yellow question mark to help organizations understand what we mean by capital campaign. So it's important to note here that we have not yet drafted the full set of definitions for this proposed survey, but for a few key definitions where we know users are likely to especially need direction, you will find draft definitions within the open comment for you to react to. In addition, the open comment is an opportunity to let us know which line items in the proposed survey you find confusing, so we can ensure that we can provide adequate guidance and definitions for all the new line items. Next, let's take a look at the expenses section. This is where you'll see the most drastic reduction in the proposed survey. The expense section will go from 25 lines currently to 7. The 3 columns of program, fundraising, and general and management will remain the same. We will also retain a breakout section where you will be asked to report your marketing expenses. Here you can see the proposed expenses section. Expenses will be broken out into personnel and non-personnel. Your personnel expenses will include everything related to W-2 employees, independent contractors, and professional fees. You will be asked to report the total amount, if any, that you paid to visual and/or performing artists. You'll see another yellow question mark here. This is another definition that we'll be testing during the open comment period. Here's our draft definition for visual and performing artist expenses. So again, we'd like to hear your feedback in the open comment about whether this definition is clear and will help you report your data accurately. Within the non-personnel expenses, the only specific lines are occupancy and depreciation. All other non-personnel expenses would be entered in the other line. You can see on the right-hand side the breakout of personal and non-personnel marketing expenses. We will also continue to provide fields for non-operating expenses, which can be left blank if they don't apply to your organization. So we just looked at the revenue and expense section, but I also wanted to talk through another question that will be added in both sections. This will be a place where you can add text to provide context or further explanation for your data. Let's take a look at what this will look like in the survey. So here we can see the fields I'm mentioning, which would appear at the end of the revenue and expense sections respectively. These spaces are distinct from the notes feature, which is currently in the survey. The current notes feature allows you to add private notes to yourself and your colleagues about where your data comes from. The notes feature will remain available in the new survey. In contrast, these additional fields will allow you to add explanations that will appear on your funder reports shared with grant makers. We have heard from many of you about the need for this, so we're proposing to include this in the current draft survey, and we look forward to your feedback through this open comment. Would this be helpful to your organization, and how would you use fields such as this? Next, let's look at the balance sheet. This is another section where the number of lines and level of detail has been reduced from 23 lines to 12. We still have a 2-column balance sheet, but only for organizations with an audit or a review. We have removed the loan details and endowment details sections. These sections are currently optional in the data profile, and we find that the number of organizations that fill them out is very low, which means that the data is not generally useful for research. Loans and endowments are extremely important factors in financial health for many organizations, but we feel that enough detail is provided within the balance sheet itself to help us understand how those factors affect individual organizations' financial health and how they play out within the sector. We also know that many organizations have adequate data about their endowments within their audits should they need it to communicate with stakeholders. Let's take a look at the balance sheet in the proposed survey. So here you can see that we have some details removed, as I mentioned, but that the same basic elements of the balance sheet remain. Next, we will look at the workforce and workspaces section. In this draft, the hours worked and the FTE calculations have been removed. We have also added a new field, which asks you to report the amount of turnover for employees. Let's take a look. Here you can see the workforce section. So again, you'll see the new turnover question, and below you can see another definition being tested in our open comment for clarity. That just defines what we mean by turnover and how to enter that information. You'll also notice, as I said, that we are no longer asking for information about the hours worked, just the count of number of positions for each of these categories. On the right-hand side is the workspace section, which is very similar to what is included in the current survey. Next, let's talk about program activity. In our current survey, we include a large number of different customized sections. For example, some organizations see a section about performances, and others see a section about exhibits. Some see both. In the new profile, we're moving away from this to a few standard sections that everyone sees. This means that while there are currently 32 potential different sections that you might see, in the future you will only see 3 sections for program activity. In addition, we've reduced the lines used to collect information about membership and subscribers from 15 lines to 3. Let's take a look. So here's the section to collect ticket and admission prices. Note here that we recommend not including 0 in your price range, but we will see later on where you can enter your free attendance numbers if you happen to have free attendance. Below that are the Streamline lines to collect data about members or subscribers. So information about your number of subscribers, members who are individuals, and members who are organizations, as well as renewal rates. Here's where you'll enter your programs. So this section is an example of what I mean when I say that there will be standard sections that everyone sees. Each organization will see the same lines, and they will all be in one section, and everyone will locate and fill in the lines relevant to their own organization and leave the others blank. If you look at the columns along the top, you'll also see that for each type of program we collect in-person programs as well as digital offerings. And for many types of programs, we collect distinct offerings as well as the number of times something was offered. In order to really delve into this section, I want to look at a few example organizations and how their programming might translate into this section. So let's start with an example historical society. Their programming consists of 3 in-person lectures, a genealogy class offered 4 times in person and 2 times online as a webinar, and 1 local history print review published twice a year, distributed with 200 issues, 200 copies per issue. So let's see how this translates to the new survey. So the example historical society would enter 3 in-person lectures on the lectures line. Since there were 3 distinct lectures, each offered 1 time, they would put a 3 in each of these boxes. Their genealogy class will be reported in the classes workshops line. Because there is 1 in-person and 1 online version, they would put 1 in each of those boxes. Since the class was offered 4 times in person and 2 times as an online webinar, they would plug in those numbers respectively in the next columns. Finally, we have their local history review published twice a year, which means 2 distinct offerings in the published works line. In the third column, they would put the number of copies they distributed. And since we know it's 200 per issue, the total would be 400. Next, let's look at an example art center. Their program activity consists of 5 productions that they presented, which means they were produced by others, but traveling to their space, with 4 shows each per production, 3 different classes, which each met 6 times, and 3 temporary exhibits. They also have docent tours offered once a week. If we take a look at their survey, they're going to enter their 5 productions, and those will be reported in the productions presented line. Since each was held 4 times, that means that there were 20 times offered total. Their 3 unique classes are reported on the classes and workshop line. Since they each met 6 times, the total number of times offered will be 18. They'll enter their 3 temporary exhibits. And their docent-led tours will be reported in the guided tours line. Since they only have 1 type of tour, they'll enter a 1. Since it's offered weekly, that adds up to 52 times throughout the year. So those are just a couple of examples to provide a feel for how this section will be filled out by various organizations. The final section within program activity focuses on attendance. Attendance will also be collected in just one section. We have also added a school-related attendance breakout, as well as a section to track financial support your organization gives out. Let's take a look. So here you can see the attendance fields where you will report attendance for all your various programs in one place. There is a row for total in person. You will be asked to break out the number who were under 18 and then the total digital participation. There are also columns for paid and free attendance. Below are lines to report your attendance that took place in schools, including the hours of instruction that you provided for arts education programming in schools. On the right is the programmatic financial support breakout, where you can report amounts given as grants, scholarships, or residencies, as well as amounts that you provided to fiscally sponsored projects. I want to end our tour of the proposed survey by noting a few additional sections that have been removed in this draft. The first is the social media and website stats. While these can be very helpful, and I know a lot of marketing departments track this really important data and use it in their everyday work, they're not often used in our research, and they're not necessarily a good fit with the high-level year-end data captured in the CDP. The net assets released from restriction and in-kind details section were both optional sections. So again, we found that most organizations do not fill these out, which means that they don't really create useful research data. And so we've removed these sections from the survey. Just to note here, even though the in-kind detail section has been removed, there still will be a single line in the contributed revenue section where you can report your in-kind revenue. What we're actually just taking out here is a more detailed section about your in-kind revenue. And same thing for net assets released from restriction. You'll still see that line in the contributed revenue section, but it's a section with further detail on that topic that will be removed. So that concludes our tour of the proposed new cultural data profile. I want to reiterate that this is still a draft. The final version of the new survey will be available in June. In the meantime, we encourage you to participate in the open comment and help us answer these questions. Will the proposed changes save you time? Will the Streamline survey accurately represent your organization? Where are better definitions needed to guide you in data entry? You'll see a link on your screen. That website will be kept up to date with the latest information about Streamline as this project continues, and will also currently direct you to the open comment. We will also be sending you the link and a follow-up email if you attended the webinar. The open comment will be open until April 7th. I want to end by emphasizing a few important points for you to know about the process. Again, we will provide documentation of the final survey in June. We'll provide 30 days notice before our release date in late 2020. And your existing CDPs will be transformed to the new format so that you can use your previous data and trend reporting with no issues. We will make your data in the current format available to you upon request as well. So thank you all for coming. And if you have questions, first I encourage you to participate in the open comment, which you can find at this link and is open till April 7th. But also feel free to reach out to our support center or our staff if you have any questions about this process, and we're happy to keep you up to date along the way. Thank you again.